Could it be? But me, your man, Louie T, welcome to this quick Louie T live special. Halftime of the Jets-Bills game. Wanted to come up here and quickly address, because I knew if I didn't do it now, all night long during the Bills-Jets Thursday Night Football overtime video, I would get, what do you think about the Watson injury? What do you think about the Watson injury? Over and over and over again. And I wish I would have been able to address this earlier, but I was at work. Wasn't able to be at home, which would have been perfect to just jump up here and discuss it as the news came down. And I actually found out about the injury from my man Sean Mack, who had tweeted out. And it was funny because as he tweeted it out to me, I had gotten the notification from Bleacher Report and ESPN simultaneously. So I kind of found out from three different sources at once. And the first thing that popped into my mind was, wow, you know, how devastating of an injury to a team that has already seen a ton of devastating injuries ravage their team already, especially on the defensive side of the football, with Watt and Merciless already gone for the year. And they were in such rhythm and sync offensively, where the Texans, who didn't think they could compete for that division crown in the AFC South. I mean, it was wide open. The Colts aren't a good football team. The Jags are inconsistent and have never been in this territory since the last decade or so, since Tom Coughlin, Jack Del Rio, was their head coach. So they don't know what it's like to be in the middle of a postseason divisional race and chase. So it's a young football team, a lot of hungry guys on that team. But you didn't look at that Jaguars team and say there's no way the Texans can't beat them out for the AFC South crown. And you look at Tennessee, and you thought the similar thing there, where this Texans team already beat Tennessee once this season in Houston, drubbed them, put up 50 on them. And you just thought that with Watson, anything was possible for this football team. And, of course, Deshaun Watson tears his ACL in practice. And it's just – and you can tell just how big of an injury it was because, you know, guys get hurt all the time. But the fact that there was such an outpouring from the rest of the NFL community, from LeBron James, among others, that sent out their condolences, this guy was electrifying. He was fun to watch. And every time we get one of these quarterbacks that comes in and changes the game, it's so fun to watch. And he was entertaining. And the brand of football that he was playing was a breath of fresh air, especially for a Texans offense that we've seen struggle over the last 3, 4, 5 years, strong with just one of the best defenses, but no offense to complement. They finally had the offense in place. And this is so ironic because I talked about on the Seahawks-Texans lockdown coverage video how Deshaun Watson got to Houston a year too late. The defense wasn't going to match the offense's productivity this season because of the injuries. And had he just gotten there a year earlier, this team could have been a Super Bowl contender. And now with this injury, they're not even a playoff contending team. I think they go back to Tom Macho Man Randy Savage. But, I mean, you went away from Savage in week 1 at halftime. What is his mental state? What is his psyche now? And obviously this offense isn't going to be as dynamic as it was with Watson at the helm. There was a instant synchronicity and chemistry between Watson and Nuke and Watson and Will Fuller V. And this offense was really starting to take off. They had scored over 30 points in just about every game with the exception of Watson's first start versus the Cincinnati Bengals, which ultimately ended up being a win, coincidentally enough. But nonetheless, he had thrown for 3 touchdowns or more in every single game he started aside from that Cincinnati Bengals game. And so Watson was lighting the NFL on fire, had already set several records and was well on his way to setting more. Had set the record, like I just mentioned, for 3 touchdown passes in like 4 or 5 straight games. He also tied Kurt Warner for the most touchdown passes to start a career, and sky was the limit for this guy. And to me, they were going to find a way to compete in the AFC South. And in my mind, I still thought this was Tennessee's division to lose. However, they were going to give the Titans a run for their money. They were going to give the Jags a run for their money because both of those teams in Jacksonville and Tennessee look the part of teams that have what it takes to win the division. And I didn't think Houston was that far off. And it's just a devastating blow to a team that we felt like was on the cusp, was on the come of doing something big this season. And this injury just derails anything that they could have potentially tried to build in Houston in 2017. And I've said this multiple times about injuries. Once you tear something, you're more susceptible to doing it again. And he tore his ACL while at Clemson. And I'm not sure if it's the same one, so I don't want to speculate, but it would not shock me if it's the exact same one he tore while at Clemson. And so when you do these types of things, you're more susceptible to doing it again. And I want to throw this last point out, and then we'll get to any comments that may be out there. When's the last time you heard of a player during the season getting injured in practice, a quarterback at that? When does that ever happen? It's one thing for an injury to be sustained in practice, in the offseason, during training camp, during the preseason. Those things happen. We hear about injuries, torn ACLs, Achilles, all the time. It's not uncommon. But during the regular season, how often is it a guy actually gets injured during practice, during the regular season? It just doesn't happen. I actually was talking to my dad about that like a year ago. Like, no one ever gets hurt during practice. It's rare that you see any significant injuries during the week of practice during the season. And I'm like, why is that? Because they happen so prevalently during the offseason in training camp. And I know guys are going a little bit harder, and as the season progresses, you're taking it a lot easier on your players. But still, non-contact injuries you would think still would occur during practice, during the week leading up to a game, and it just doesn't happen very often. So that really shocked me when I heard that he had done this on a non-contact injury in practice, because how often is it that injuries like this are sustained in practice during the regular season? It just doesn't happen very often. If you can recall an injury like this during the regular season, I'd love to hear from you guys, because I don't recall an injury of this magnitude happening during the regular season. We see these all the time during the games, during the regular season, during the offseason, in training camp, in the practices, in the preseason. We hear about injuries all the time. But rarely do we hear about these types of injuries during the regular season, during practice. It's just so rare. I'm just floored by this injury, and I'm really disappointed, and I hurt for Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans organization and the fan base. I hurt for them because this changes the dynamics of their season tremendously. I mean, you go from a team that had a legitimate shot at making the postseason, either as a wild card or as a division winner, to now having to have the hopes of your season rest on Tom Savage. And with your defense being in the shape that it's in, you really needed to score points and outscore teams to win. I highly doubt that that's going to occur now that Tom Savage is most likely going to be your trigger man moving forward. So I'm really disappointed at this. The only thing that could come good of this is that you may come away with a really quality draft pick that will help grow this team even further. But again, I'm not one to talk about draft picks or, losing games, because I don't want to hear about that. To me, that's nonsense. That's garbage. And I hate the fact that this happened to Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. They've already had enough injuries this season, and this guy was coming of age right before our very eyes. And again, in a league where rookies come in and a lot of times struggle, like Deshaun Kaiser has this season, like Mitchell Trubisky has, it's always refreshing to have a guy come in, take the league by storm, like Deshaun Watson was doing. And his story was a great one. And to see it end the way that it did in his rookie season and have his season cut short by this injury is just devastating. So let's take to anybody that's out there that has a comment and see what you guys have to say before we get back to the game. Andrew Kim says, I feel bad for Houston. Watson was on pace to break the rookie passing touchdown record. It just wasn't meant to be this year. The Jags and Titans have to take advantage of this year. They will. They most certainly will. And I still didn't think the Texans were going to win the division this year, but it damn sure was going to be competitive, and the Texans were going to make it interesting. And they still could. You know, I don't want to count them out, but I don't see it happening with Tom Savage at quarterback. And I echo those sentiments. I really feel for the Texans organization and Deshaun Watson for sure. BE says, are you going to make a change on your Texans? No, I'm not going to change my pick because the Colts they're not a good football team. And even though they have a quarterback that I probably trust more so than Tom Savage, the Texans are at home. I expect them to still find a way to get it done. And like I told you, my 7th grade science teacher once told me, your first answer is usually your right answer. I'd feel really poor if I changed my answer and then the Texans somehow, some way rally around Tom Savage and get this win. I'll just leave it the way it is, and we'll see what happens. Pepe, the YouTuber, says, and there goes our season. At least Houston won the World Series. At least there's that, right? Andrew Kim says, if this injury stuff doesn't stop, at this rate, the NFL will have no decent or at least backup quarterbacks with some upside because they will be starting Luck on IR too. Just sucks. That's the nature. This is a really physical and physically demanding game, and that's the nature of the beast. You know, normally quarterbacks are absolved from all of these injuries. It's usually skill guys, defensive players, things of that nature. You rarely see quarterbacks. They have so many rules put in place to protect the quarterback that you rarely see these types of injuries sustained by quarterbacks. But over the last 2 years, I'd say that we've seen a ton of quarterbacks really, really affected by injuries. Tony Romo, Teddy Bridgewater, Deshaun Watson now, Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers. I'm pretty sure there are others that have been affected by injuries that have really cost teams ball games. But nonetheless, it is what it is. That's the way this game is set up, and it's a physically demanding game. And as we've seen, even the quarterbacks aren't absolved of suffering serious injuries. First name, last name says, it's been a bad luck for the whole city of Houston aside from the World Series. Archangel says, my heart broke for this kid because he was having a magical season and he comes off as a well-mannered young man and humbled, kept to himself. I really hate that for him. And I think that's a sentiment echoed by a lot of people as well. Me too, because Deshaun Watson's a really good dude. You know, remember he gave his first game check to some of the lunch ladies that worked for the Texans as a gesture to help them kind of get back on their feet. Man, he's just a good dude. And he's one of those guys that pays it forward. You remember Warwick Dunn blessed his mom and his family with a house when I said Robbie Anderson because I just saw him score a touchdown. When Deshaun Watson was growing up, he was like 12 when Warwick Dunn and that foundation was able to bless them with a house. I mean, and he's just paying it forward. He's a good dude, man, and you hate to see things like this, bad things happen to good people, man. And so it's really a tough break for him. And Reese says, tough break for Houston. They've been waiting for this for such a long time. This is what they've longed for. They have looked for a franchise quarterback since they've been a team. And you're spot on with that. You know, it started with David Carr, and they've went through a number of quarterbacks and just haven't been able to find the guy. And it's not to say that his career is over. I don't want to make it seem like because he's injured now, all of a sudden his career is done and he can't bounce back from this. I fully expect this guy to come back and be bigger, stronger, tougher than ever from this injury. The ACL injury to me is like Tommy John surgery in baseball. Guys usually come back bigger, stronger than ever, and I fully expect him with medical technology and science for him to be back on his feet, throwing a football, running around, and being the same Deshaun Watson that we fell in love with in his rookie season, that we fell in love with at Clemson. It just sucks because this is a setback for a young man and a team that was taking huge strides forward to really put this team in a different situation. I mean, this changes the whole look of this organization drastically. I mean, Bill O'Brien may have been able to save his job and maybe change the fortunes of this entire organization with Deshaun Watson at the helm. Now this thing could go south, and O'Brien could get fired. Hell, Rick Smith, their GM, could get fired because of this. Who knows? I mean, this injury could change the fortunes of not just the season, but some jobs and livelihoods in that Texans organization. Pepe, the YouTuber, says, preparing myself to go to the Texans, go from Texans score 4 touchdowns this game to Texans score 4 field goals and a rushing touchdown this game. And that is the struggle that the Texans fan must now endure because of this injury. They're just not going to be as prolific and dynamic offensively because of this injury. Kevin Skill says, Tom Savage better be ready, LOL. The problem is he wasn't ready at the beginning of the season. Some argue he got the hook a little too soon, but we're going to see. He's going to get every opportunity now because they don't have anybody else behind him. He's going to get every opportunity to succeed in Houston in the rest of 2017. We'll see if he takes full advantage of this opportunity. Jazzy E says, we signing Colin Kaepernick. Bob Manere got to after his racist comments. You would think that would be something that would be on the table, but I don't know if he'll be willing to do that. We'll see, because that would go a long way, I guess, to trying to heal some of the damage that he did with those comments. But I don't know if people would take it the right way, because people would look at it as a publicity stunt if he were to sign Colin Kaepernick. But at the same time, some people wouldn't even really care, just the fact that he's back in the league. I don't know if Colin Kaepernick's getting back in the league. I honestly think he's being blackballed at this point. So we'll see. But he would fit this Texans offense. I mean, they reshaped and restructured this offense to fit Deshaun Watson's skill set. Colin Kaepernick has a similar skill set. He's not as dynamic as Watson is throwing the football, but Colin Kaepernick does have a similar skill set. And so we'll see. Makes a lot of sense, you would think. But so did Kaepernick to Miami and Tennessee when they had injuries at the quarterback position, and those didn't come to fruition. So what makes sense doesn't always take place. Andrew Kim says, I heard one of the reasons Dwayne Brown was traded was because of Deshaun Watson's ability to run. I really feel bad for Savage because he's going to feel the heat. I agree that, you could get away with not having the most stable of tackles because Watson could create on his own. I talked about Ezekiel Elliott being his own blocker, BYOB. Watson could also do that same thing when you're a mobile quarterback. We've seen it with McCown tonight. We've seen it with Tyrod Taylor tonight. Sometimes you can make guys miss. Tyrod Taylor, however, has been sacked a ton tonight, actually. But nonetheless, mobile quarterbacks can make guys miss and create off schedule. And so good to see Zay Jones back on the football field after that scary hyperextension of his knee. Good to see him back out there running around. He's got a noticeable little hitch in his giddy up, but just the fact that he's back out there running around is a good sign. He may still be injured after this game is over, after the adrenaline wears off and the swelling takes effect. He may be out for a couple of weeks. We'll see. But back to your point about Dwayne Brown being traded, that trade was made because they thought they would be able to have Watson maneuver, manipulate, and create in the pocket with his legs. And so that really hurts now as this happens. Archangel says, this got to hurt being a Texans fan, especially if you're a Texans faithful and you've been hanging in there for the longest, just waiting on some great talent like this to come, and it's only your first. So, yeah, it sucks. But like I said, it's not the end of the world. It's not like this guy's not going to come back. It just sucks because, like you guys have noted, they waited for this moment. They waited for this time to come. It finally got here, and it was so brief. It was like a shooting star in his rookie season. So much was left to be done, and that was just taken from him with this injury. Cloud says, this is crazy, man. Watson was having a great rookie season. Teddy Bridgewater got injured in practice, but that was in the offseason. Like I said, I don't recall anybody getting injured like this in the regular season in practice. It just doesn't happen. Injuries happen in the offseason all the time. Remember, Teddy Bridgewater was injured in the preseason right before the season started. They were able to trade for Sam Bradford, and Bradford was able to start by week 2 because he wasn't up to speed in week 1. So they started Sean Hill. But I'm talking in the regular season. When's the last time we've seen a guy get injured like this? It just doesn't happen very often. It's crazy to see how this transpired. Um, Jazzy E says, we traded all our picks to the Browns so they get another draft pick to squander. That's right. You're right. You traded up to get Deshaun Watson. So even if you don't perform well the remainder of the season, you don't really benefit because of it because, yeah, you're right. You guys did trade up to get Watson. So there's no silver lining in this injury. It's just all bad, and that's a shame. Sean Mack says, I wanted Watson so bad. This will help my Browns get a higher draft pick, though I really don't like seeing it come about this way. I agree. You don't want to get a higher draft pick via another man's injury, but it is what it is. I mean, this is nothing that anybody did. It's a freak accident. Leo C says, it's the opposite knee from the one he tore in college, but yeah, it still sucks. And even to that point, when you injure a leg, you overcompensate then because of the injury. So you just never know. And I don't think that had anything to do with it. I've always said that our legs, our bodies, especially athletes, they have a finite amount of mileage on them before something happens. And for some, you could go your entire career without an injury, a significant one. For others, there's a finite amount of cuts and stops and plants and drives that you have on that knee or leg or tendon or whatever before it goes out. And for Deshaun Watson, he met that number today, and his leg it gave way. Andre P. Musgrove says, I hope he doesn't end up like RG3. Both guys are on a similar tear through the league before knee injuries. He's different in the sense that he did a much better job of reading coverages and defenses. Robert Griffin III never could read defenses. And to take it a step further, Robert Griffin III didn't know how to slide and protect himself. And a lot of his injuries actually came in the pocket, if you could remember and recall with Robert Griffin III. But he didn't do a good job of protecting himself. Remember, Robert Griffin III sustained a concussion on the sidelines versus the Atlanta Falcons when he didn't slide, took a hit, and sustained a concussion. He took the hit running out of the pocket with Haloti Ngata because he dove instead of sliding. Robert Griffin III didn't know how to protect himself. Watson does. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem moving forward. And I'll take it a step further. Watson can actually read NFL defense, or at least he did a good enough job of doing it this year that I don't think it'll be as big a problem moving forward. But like you said, no one saw the rise and fall and demise of Robert Griffin III as the way it happened. So I'm hoping that a similar situation, like Andre said, doesn't happen for this young man here. Q-Bone says, damn, why him? A lot of people are asking that today. Klaus says, something in that Gatorade, man. Archangel says, I actually enjoyed watching the highlights on this kid. Watson simply for the love of the game, not because he's on my team or fantasy either. And that's what I said. Just football fans in general. There was a consensus around the league of outpouring support for him because no one wants to see anybody get hurt. But guys lose their ACLs all the time, but you don't hear players from other teams chiming in and saying, hey, man, we really are sorry about the injury, yada, yada, yada. And so that just tells you how dynamic he was and how he was taking the league by storm. So it really is a tough situation, one that you don't want to see anybody go through. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Mazer _12 says, our season is over unless Savage, Fuller, Hopkins can ball out, mostly Savage. It's going to come down to Tom Savage proving his worth. His agent was upset when he was benched at halftime of the first game of the season. Now he gets a chance to redeem himself and show that he can play in this league. He better take full advantage of this opportunity because if he doesn't, he might not only be a career backup, he may find himself out of the league if he doesn't take advantage of this opportunity. I've already told you guys that Robbie Anderson was legit. I told you that last week when I broke down the Jets game versus the Falcons. I told you that we underestimated the talent the Jets have. We'll talk about it tonight. I don't want to talk about it right now. Kevin says, are the Colts going to win the game this Sunday since Watson is injured? I don't think so. I'm not changing mine. You can feel free to change yours. I'm not changing mine at all. Daddy Smokes Yam says, this would happen right after the trade deadline, shaking my head. Yep, it would, wouldn't it? So it's amazing. It sucks. It really does. I'll take a couple more and then we'll get out of here. Um, Pepe, the YouTuber, says, I'll take Uncle Rico as our quarterback. Literally anyone, please help. And he's begging for a job. So if he can get some work, he'll take it. No doubt. Robin Sanders says, normally I don't care about other players from other teams, but Watson is a good kid. It sucks. Hashtag HTTR. And again, that's the sentiment that you've seen from around the league is that most people really don't give a damn about other players on other teams. But this guy transcends that because of his talents and his good nature. You know, everybody heard about what he did for the ladies in the lunchroom that were victims of Hurricane Harvey. And he's just a good kid. He's a good dude and a hell of a football player. And a lot of people said he's a good football player, but an even better person. And that's what makes this that much more worse. Isaac Schnook says, huge blow to my fantasy. And my other QB is Kirk, and his O-line is hurt, man. The NFL Reaper is unforgiving. Robin Sanders says, you look like Josh Doxson. Thanks. I get that all the time. Jabril A says, we went from quarterback hell to quarterback nirvana back to quarterback hell in a matter of one day. And that's the nature of the NFL. It can happen in the drop of a hat. So, in any event, Michael Thompson says, stuff like this shows how strong Cam Newton is. It does, but then again, you know, his body is built differently. You know what I mean? He's got a different body type. And like I said, everyone's got a finite amount of cuts and stops and plants and drives on their knee, on their tendons before something gives. And, you know, Watson he hit his, you know, and it sucks. But in any event, man, we're going to get out of here. We'll be back later, of course, for Thursday Night Football overtime. Jets, Bills, shaping up to be a pretty good game. Jets right now leading 17-7, but they've been known to blow leads, so we'll see if they're able to hold on. But in any event, I'm your man, Louie T, and I'm signing off. I'll see you guys later. Come join me for Thursday Night Football overtime. Jets, Bills. I'll see you a little bit later on. Enjoy the rest of the game. Have a good one.